welcome back, listeners. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely adventure that we get to do bi-weekly together called Learning from Friends, and it is a pleasure to have you join us back here again after our 2-week break from each other. I hope you have been enjoying the last couple of episodes. I've been kind of going out there talking about some financial literacy stuff, then talking about with my friend Joe King ATL, talking about social art. There have been some great stuff. And today, what we're actually going to be going into is talking to a former guest, continuing a conversation from episode 11. We are now in the 80s, and we're going to go back to episode number 11 here with a guest of talking about the Church of Christ and his transitioning, going between his one church to his new church that he is going to go to. For that, he was in Alabama, and now he's going all the way go over towards the West Coast and going to Utah. So I'm excited to kind of hear a little bit more about this journey, how he's kind of growing as an individual in his ministry. And with that, before we can get there, we got to do my mom's quote of the day. So, Mom, take it away.
Your purpose is not the thing you do. It is the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. Dr. Carolyn Leaf.
Thank you, Mom, for providing those words of wisdom, the inspiration to be able to carry on this podcast each individual time that I get to pick your quotes. A lot of these quotes, for y'all that don't know, my mom sends me throughout the week, or every so often, just something just to kind of give me a little bit of inspiration. And I save these. And what we do is we sit down after I get about 15 or 20, and I sit and I record them. And what I'll do is after the episode is done being recorded, I will sit back and I'll pick through the quotes that my mom has sent me, and I will insert it into the episode because I want it to fit the theme and the idea of the episode itself. And there's always something that kind of plugs there to kind of gather that attention. So thank you, Mom, for being that inspiration throughout episodes and being able to always be there as support. And my dad has always been one of those amazing individuals as well that has really been able to provide such a wonderful, amazing life and inspiration for me as well. So be thankful for your parents. Say thank you to the people around you. It's very important to be able to give that. We have some extra guests with us today as well, that we've got some dogs in the house. So they may make an appearance every so often. So that's exciting as well. So Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, Kay, I appreciate it. I'm glad you saw fit to have me come back and, dig deeper into this thing we call ministry.
Yeah, because dude, you could do a whole you could create a whole podcast and go down a whole long road for literally years talking about your ministry and all the different stuff that's out there.
Yes.
And I'm sure out there, if you guys want to start digging, you could find hundreds and thousands of podcasts out there on that. But we're going to be giving one person specific story, and that's what's exciting here from friendship, of being able to kind of grow that. And how did we originally meet? We're going to go back to episode number 11 here real quick. How in the world did we originally meet?
Guess through a love of bowling way back at the old AMF Woodstock lanes. They used to have a thing on Sundays where, you could bowl for free for a couple hours. But with that, you had to meet some strangers and say, hey, can I bowl on your lane with you? And unfortunately, some people are not the nicest because, less bowlers means you get to bowl more on your lane.
True.
So, some people are more protective, and it was me and my wife's first time, and knowing how you are now, like, this fits your personality perfect, but, you just kind of said, hey, why don't y'all come bowl with us? And I feel like, it was kind of a stepbrothers moment at the end. It was like, whoa, did we just become friends? And, it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, it's very true. And then you bowled in that league that I bowled in for a while with us.
Yeah.
And so that was always really enjoyable and fun, just to kind of have those little connections that build off of each other. And being able to have that is you never know where friendships are coming from. And that's something that's really cool with learning from friends, is talking or reconnecting or because I haven't seen you in over probably a year now.
Mm-hmm.
Since I've got to see you since you moved down to Alabama.
And, it was funny, I guess 4 years ago now, I had my 30th birthday right here where we're
Yeah.
sitting recording this episode, and I invited you. And I remember my mom making the thing, said, you know, I love when we have these birthday parties and you invite your friends, because your friends are not cut from the same cloth. Like, you know, you have friends from bowling, friends from coaching football, friends from Boy Scouts, and so on. And it's just great getting to see all these walks of your life come together and interact with one another.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's a great way your mom has a great way with words on that.
Yes.
That's cool. Yeah, because I had walking into the room, I think I knew one other person in the room besides your wife. And I'm like, "Okay, cool." But
Mhm.
that was forgotten, that's been 4 years now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Time flies, man.
Yeah.
Time continues to fly as we continue to kinda grow. That's something that is about this episode is there's been 2 years of growth since the last time we spoke, and that's what I'm excited to be able to, like, hear and share as you've grown and then continuing to grow with going out towards Utah.
And, you know, one thing that I did fail to mention, I have my notes here, you know, things that I want to touch. And I think that this is huge that talks about our friendship. As a matter of fact, my sister liked your name so much and Cade that she named my little nephew Cade Elliott.
What? I
Yes.
thought it was, like, something totally different, like Cade's Cove or something like that. That's
No,
not connected.
literally, like, you
Oh.
know, I would talk about you, and secretly she's like, my first son, I'm gonna name it Cade. And, you know, when she dropped that bomb on me, I was like, "You know, I have a friend named Cade." She's like, "Where'd you think I got the name?" Like, she
Oh
literally
my god, that's a huge honor.
Yes.
Now now I feel like I have something more to have to live up to in life. I feel like I gotta live up to the name for
Yeah.
this child.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna jump back here
Yeah.
before I interrupted you. That's my apologies
Yeah.
here because that's oh my gosh. Now I have to like catch my breath for a second. That's I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like I knew that there was a connection there, but I didn't think it was like oh because of that name I heard you saying over and over again. I'm like oh there's gonna be some potential jargon and
Mhm.
words that you may use throughout the podcast. Is there any that you may want to introduce now that we'll use multiple times over and over again, or do you want me just to go hey? Can you say a little bit about that word for me a little bit just to give some more clarity?
I mean, there may be some things that I say that I don't think about, but obviously, if I say something that you don't know what it means, please ask me to clarify.
Yeah.
But just some terms, you know, I do not refer to myself as a pastor or reverend. I refer to myself as a minister or servant because at the end of the day, I'm just another person. And as far as the leadership of the Church of Christ, the elders are eldership, which, you know, eldership is the plural of the leadership of the
Gotcha.
congregation. And we will definitely come to a point that I will use the words Mormon and LDS interchangeably, which means Latter day Saints. Kind of like there are terms that are considered derogatory to a religion. I've come to realize that to the LDS or Latter day Saints, the term Mormon is kind of derogatory.
Interesting.
So I try to say LDS or Latter day Saints as respect to them.
I love
Because, you
that
know,
you're sharing that information.
yeah,
That's something I never would have thought about at all.
yeah. It's things that I've learned trying to dig into the Utalian
I love that
culture.
Utalian.
Yeah,
Wow.
culture. I know we'll talk more about that later, but
Because that's coming up here in the next. You leave out in a couple days to start
yeah,
making your way out to Utah. This is your stopover in Georgia.
our car arrived there Sunday.
Very good.
Yeah, our pod should arrive there Friday. I should arrive there Friday. My dog should arrive there that Sunday, which that's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
a whole. You were
uh,
explaining that process to me
yeah,
earlier, and it's like a 29-step program, and you're like,
yeah,
wait, what?
yeah, and, you know, that's just another stop for, the 28th, well, the 30th, which will be the first Sunday that I'll be there, I won't be preaching, but my best friend is having a baby shower that the church is putting on. Intentionally pushed it back till we'll be there because my friend very much wanted me and Jennifer there.
Aw.
And, that's after arriving there Friday,
Yeah, that's gonna be a long
unloading
Sunday.
Saturday, and then Sunday's gonna be just insane.
I can't imagine of all that just
Yeah.
because of any move is hard.
Mhm.
Any move is hard, especially going into an area that you have no clue, but having a friend there is a big world of a difference.
Mhm.
That's huge.
Yes.
Now, with that, you had just mentioned about with the LDS, what about some stereotypes that you experience that you want to address within the Church of Christ?
Well,
Or being a preacher, not
yeah,
preacher, minister.
yeah.
See, that's where I was already slipped up already.
I think what a lot of people do not realize is they see the preacher giving a lesson on Sunday. And in preparation for this podcast, I talked to several of my preacher friends because I want to, my experience may not be the same as your experience in ministry. But one of the things that we consistently agreed on is, if I only put 40 hours a week into my ministry, that's a slow week.
Yeah.
More practically, there are weeks that I put 80 to 100 hours into my ministry because, just things come up and everything is running. And I just don't think that people think about that often enough. We are not untouchable.
Yeah.
We are
True.
people. We sin. We're not perfect. We mess up. We're not perfect. That's kind of some of the thing. We are approachable. Like, don't feel like, that you can't come talk to us on Sunday or you can't call us. We actually very much enjoy getting those phone calls and knowing that we're needed and can help you. I mean, that's my job as a minister
Yeah,
or
that
a
is,
servant.
yeah, it's part of same with teaching in the sense of if we're not untouchable, I'm gonna, compare here
Yeah.
of if you have a question, ask it.
Mhm.
If you're curious about something and you need help with something or guidance, ask for it. It's
Mhm.
the whole idea of the art of asking, and topic that I will one day eventually kind of dive into a little bit of if you don't reach out to another individual and you can't build a connection or build a community more that way because
Mhm.
you don't feel as you feel more connected when you actually do talk to that individual, and you're maybe a leader of the church in a way, but it doesn't mean that you can't still be a part of it and still be connected to this individual by if you go and ask them, they're not going to shun you or push you away from the church or anything. Because if we all need to be kind of not driven back, but brought back sometimes from being maybe astray or
Mhm.
maybe of thinking of something that we don't know. Is this wrong? Is this right? Like what? I need some guidance. The key thing is guidance
Mhm.
that we all need here. Now you're going from one church to another church here. And something that has me curious that is how do they go about getting a new minister at a church
Well,
within the Church of Christ? Because
yeah.
each church is different.
Well, I think as a matter of comparison, a lot of churches, and I use the term churches, in this sense, including Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, really and truly there's a board or something that basically just assigns the church a minister. But in the Church of Christ, it's done different. Leadership of the church gets to pick their own minister, which
Okay.
is great. I'm kind of going to jump ahead a little bit. A church calls you after they review your resume and sample sermons. And
Okay.
as a coach in the past, I equate this a lot to what we see in college athletics now. I kind of see the sample sermons as your highlight tape.
There you go.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? And, they like what they saw and they invite you out for a recruiting visit.
Okay.
And, you come out, see what you think, and, they're trying to impress you just as much as you're trying to impress them. At some point, you have to sit down with your family and decide which offer was right for you. Just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, me and my wife visited Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, Utah, Mississippi, and that's just to name
Oh,
a
wow.
couple of the states that we went to. And while that was great getting to see what we call the USA, it was tiresome. We've been doing that since January.
Oh, yeah, and so to give a, recap here, January, February, March, April, May, and we're in June now, so that's
Mhm.
almost half a year that they were kind of going around. Now, this same time, he's still at his home church that he's currently at before moving to the next one. They're still, it's not like he had completely stopped his ministry. He was still doing it. He was just looking for, where am I going to go to next?
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and insert this here. Basically, how that happened a couple months before January, the men of the church sat down with me and said, "Hey, the finances of the church are not looking too great. Like, we just want to be transparent with you." And at that point, I started sending resumes out, sending out my highlight tape, if you will. And around January, I started getting all these calls for tryouts, and I sat down with the men of the congregation and said, "Hey, I kind of got to see what's out there for me, and I don't think it's fair for me to continue working with the church here while I'm doing this and going to Alabama, Texas, Utah, all these places." And they agreed, and at that point, I think the congregation had to sit down and have a tough conversation with themselves. And as we sit here today, they are no longer meeting. They've closed down the church I hate that, but that would have happened with or without me, honestly. So that's kind of how that happened, but it doesn't happen that way with other churches and other ministers. Sometimes preachers will use their vacation time to go to a tryout, like see, is the grass really greener over there, or am I doing okay where I'm at? Like, is this really a jump I want to make?
Yeah. That's hard decision to make at any point, to be
Yeah.
able to decide, okay, yeah, I'm happy here, but is there another place that maybe I'm being called to or being kind of
Mhm.
drawn towards?
Yeah.
And you mentioned like the men of the church. Is that similar to like the board of elders in kind of in a way? Or what's kind of that
Well,
difference there between those kind of
well,
two?
see, some churches have elders and some don't.
Okay.
Because in the book of Timothy, we are given who's qualified. We have God's expectations for that. Like you need to be married with children and rule your own house well. Kind of have proven yourself because I mean you're looking at these men to rule the church well, and they need to rule their family well to prove that they can run the church well. And that's the expectations that are laid out. And a lot of times the way it goes down is the minister, myself, I will preach on the qualification of elders and say, we would like for you to submit names of people who you believe exemplify the qualifications that we have learned, and we'll put them and at some point a lot of times the men say, "Hey, I think these three would be great." and you put their name among the church and say, if you have any reason that these men should not be installed in elders, you have 2 weeks to let us know so we can bring it up. Because, sometimes there may be things about you that I don't know
True.
that somebody else does and says, "Hey, I don't think he'd be fit because of XYZ." And then we go to that individual and say, "Hey, this was brought up. Like, do you think that this disqualifies you?" So there may not be men in a congregation who are qualified. And also in Timothy, we see that it says, we don't want it says a woman should not take the place of a man. So, we believe that men should serve in leadership because that's what God said, and we kind of go with that. So that's why it's men of the church and not ladies. But, it's a whole nother issue. We could talk about how crucial women are to the
Yes.
church. I just don't want your listeners to think that we degrade women. We just go with what God says, and that's it.
Man, in each religion, each thing is different, and we're not promoting one religion being
No.
better or different than other. They're all different,
Mhm.
and that's the thing. They all kind of bring different things to the table,
Yeah.
and that's when it comes to interpretation as well is a very big thing when it comes into
Yeah.
religion. That some things about. So how is there any is there 5 people, 10 people? Can the number range of how many people are on the board of elders?
Oh, yes. The biggest thing is more than one.
More than one. Oh, there you go.
Because it needs to be a plurality, not just one person running
Okay.
the church.
Gotcha. That makes a lot
Yeah.
a lot of good sense. Now, you had mentioned whenever you're going to these different places for these tryouts, what is a tryout like besides, okay, they have your highlight reel, they have your resume, and now you're having to figure out how to get out there, and you're traveling to these different states. That ain't cheap. How in
No.
the world are you kind of negotiating this to be able to go and do this in order to make sure that you're not losing money whenever you go
Well,
as well?
when you get that call to come out for a tryout, you have to kind of step out of your comfort zone and say, "Hey, what's gonna be covered? Are you gonna pay for my hotel? Are you gonna reimburse me for gas? Or, going from Alabama to Utah?
Yeah.
Are you gonna pay for my plane ticket?" Like, that's just gonna have to happen. And they are trying to understand this too, and they definitely wine and dine you a little bit. You get to go to some good restaurants, and for anonymity, I'm not going to mention specific places, but some places will take you to aquariums or zoos and try and show you what the city has to offer.
Smart.
I've gotten to maybe they have a well-known member. That member's gonna be at one of the meals, to kinda entice you, if you will. Think of it from a recruiting perspective. Imagine if the University of Georgia is calling you and they really want you to come and you're a running back and they get Herschel Walker to come to the mill, or an Auburn fan gets Bo Jackson.
That's a
That's
big
gonna
deal.
have
Yeah,
some
those are
influence to you,
exactly.
like, "Whoa, they must really want me if they're getting Herschel Walker or Bo Jackson to come out." And, there's a lot of that, and sometimes congregations are very honest. They're like, "Who are we competing against?" Like,
Oh,
if
okay.
they really want you, like, they'll say, "Where do we rank?" Like, what do we need to do to move up?
I like the bluntness.
Yeah, honestly, like, when I had got my offer from Utah, I went to another congregation that we were strongly considering, for a second trial. And I sat down with the men and I said, "Hey, look, I've got this offer on the table. Like, this is it. This is what you got to beat." And I told them, I said, "But, I like this about you, and this is where I need you to kind of meet me." And they were blunt and they were like, "Dude, that's a great offer. You need to
You
take
should take that
that."
one. We
And
can't match that.
yeah. And like, we can't do that. Like, you're going to be better off there. And that's part of love for one another.
That's a
Like,
huge
they
one.
love me
Yeah.
enough to say, I don't think, I think you are right for us, but we're not right for you.
Yeah. At this
And
point in time, this is what's needed.
yeah,
And you're being given this opportunity. You should probably sit back and probably take that.
yeah,
And some of that, it's not always money. It could, as
yeah,
you said, it could be many other things. But I'm curious as a person when it comes to money wise, because we all have our different jobs and we all have
yeah.
different stuff that's there. How do you handle like your finances and taxes as a preacher?
Oh, it is insane because you're basically self-employed is the way that the government looks at it. And the thing of it is, I said everything is ministry,
Yes.
which basically means everything is a tax deduction.
Ah,
You know,
okay.
say you and I go to lunch and we talk about spiritual things, we talk about the Bible, and I pick up the bill. That's a tax deduction for me.
Hmm.
And I mean, my house is a tax deduction because I use it to host meals for
True.
members. My car is a tax deduction.
You gotta somehow
Like,
get from point A to point B.
yeah,
Yeah.
my cell phone's a tax deduction. Like, that just gives you some idea of what we're working with here. And so you really want to try and be really organized because
Have a good CPA.
keeping up with a lot of receipts. I'm constantly taking pictures of receipts and such.
Yeah, you gotta be able to make sure that at the end of the day, if Uncle Sam comes knocking, that you can be able to prove and show, "Hey, here's my stuff. Here's
Yeah.
what I've got. Here's the organization. Here's the
And
date. Here's the stuff."
just to give you an idea, moving expenses to Utah.
Oh,
I
gosh, I
mean,
bet you that's through the roof right now.
uh, I mean, we're just going to ballpark it and say, about $10,000. Like, that's what we're working with. But thankfully, the congregation in Utah has pretty much covered the bulk of that bill. But, the church, that's tax deductions for them too.
True.
So they're like, "We need you to send us receipts." So, like, I've had to keep up with receipts of everything that, like, I do. And, thank goodness for what we do, what stores do now. "Would you like an emailed copy of your receipt?" Like, I love that now because then I just forward it to the elders and they have it.
Yes.
And they're like, "Daniel, we need those receipts. Check your email." Like,
It's
it's
there.
there.
I promise. It's
Like,
there.
somewhere, like,
Yeah.
it may not have come organized, but it's there. You just have to search for it. And that's great to have a database in your emails that you can go
Yes.
back and look, and maybe they can't find it and you can find it for them because it's in your email box too under sent.
True. And I that's something that you're having to plan for and be constantly aware of in order to be able to handle that. And that is a positive right now, being as young as you are,
Mhm.
to be able to know how to use the technology and kind of get that in place. How do you deal with being as young as you are in the ministry right now? Because of in comparison of being a maybe in your 40s or your 50s, you're in your 30s.
Yeah, but, the crazy thing is, I remember when I was, younger, like a kid, in school. I remember at church, we had a over the hill party for somebody that turned 30, and I'm like, "That's old." And
Oh,
now here I am, I'm like, "That's young."
yeah.
Like, 'cause here I am. But,
How perspectives change.
you really have to earn the respect of those who have celebrated more birthdays than you, if you will. They may be wary to come to you for advice, but with everything I do, I try to remember that there is more knowledge sitting down than standing up. And what I mean by that is that the people sitting down that are listening to my sermons and Bible classes have more knowledge than me. They
Yeah.
have more experience, and I try to make it very clear that I don't know more than you. And I hope that that's okay. I hope that we can learn together,
Yeah.
learn as a church, and I try to keep myself humble. You know, my wife, Jennifer, is really good at that, really good at humbling me. And, you know, this is things that help, I would say.
Yeah, having that in place. And then one thing that I was curious about, this is something that you mentioned earlier about within the church. A lot of them like to have families because of your home life comparison to the church life. Has that affected you in any way of whenever you're going into your interviews by chance?
What do you mean by that?
So you don't have children,
Yeah.
and they say how you kind of run the household from having children and not for you not having children, still being young and not having children. Has that affected you being able to get a job at, say, a church that maybe you have been interested in, or is it something that's just kind of been overlooked?
Is kind of a silent thing. I don't think that I've had congregations boldly say, "We don't want you because you don't have kids." I mean, that would come across rude, but no doubt there's probably some congregations that didn't invite me out for a tryout because I don't have kids. Likewise, I'm glad you brought this up. There are ministry jobs that call me and not somebody else because I'm married. You know,
Oh.
they may not want a single guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, they have their reasons for that. And because maybe they have a lot of people in the congregation that are struggling with marriage issues,
Mm.
and they really want a minister who has been married and can kind of relate a little bit.
Helps out definitely with counseling. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you I have a friend who is single in ministry, and he was like, "Dude, I would love to have you come out and preach a sermon series about marriage because I can't hit that. I don't know nothing about it."
That's true.
And, you know, he said, you know, it has definitely influenced him, and it is a struggle because, you know, I would love to give parenting advice, but I have none to give. I have
True.
no experience. But that's where having an eldership, because, you know, they, to be qualified to be an elder, they have to have kids. I can't help you, but why don't you go talk to the elders about that? You know, and that's something that I didn't have at the last congregation is qualified men to be elders. So I may not have had anybody to send them to. And I'm loving that I have people that I can, an eldership that I can delegate to. I'm looking forward to that new tool.
New tool in the toolbox, new
Yeah.
community. You had mentioned with the elders, are there like staff members or anything like that that are on the church that kind of help you with your kind of day to day, or they may not necessarily be staff in the sense of paid staff, they may be volunteered staff of some sort that help out within the church?
Well, kinda paid and unpaid. I mean, the elders a lot of times are not paid. Shameless plug here. I think sometimes the elders deserve to be paid more than me. I hope that doesn't get out too much, but, they do a lot of work. And, you know, a lot of times churches will have a paid secretary or unpaid, just, you know, work's gotta get done. You know, you may have a youth minister, a tech guy,
Yeah.
because man, that's something that since COVID-19 has really changed in
Oh,
the
the
church,
technology side of things. Oh, my word.
because now we're trying to stream services and somebody needs to take that of themselves. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes that make things work that may or may not get the praise or honor. Just before you got here, I was watching a documentary on the Blue Angels.
Oh,
What
yes.
and I really didn't realize how many people there are behind the scene, not in the aircraft, that make things happen. And there's a lot of people in the church that do not get the praise that they need, from the dude that counts how many people are there to the dude that counts the money. I mean, to steal, and I will give credit where credit is due, a quote from one of my best friends and a man who I hope to become better friends with when I get in Utah is Tony Perry and Spencer. They, on Sunday nights, they get together and have a meal together, and they say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yep.
It also takes a village to run a church.
Nice. I love that. And then that is a huge, big segments within the church. Within any business, there's always people that are unspoken, they're unseen, but without them, it would fold. And so that, how do y'all make business decisions like that? Is it through these people that are kind of like everybody assigned a certain kind of job, or certain elders handle certain things? Or is that like, hey, Jimmy down there runs a hardware store, so he's good with finances and he'll keep the books for you? Like, is it kind of more, is there a set group of people for a business meeting, or is it more of a, hey, this is again volunteer kind of basis?
I mean,
kind of
another aspect of the church leadership is what we call deacons. And, just like a preacher cannot handle everything, elders cannot handle everything. They need to delegate too. Maybe, you have a member in your congregation that is a construction worker and they're really good with, fixing stuff.
yeah.
You would make them a deacon, which there's also qualifications for a deacon, things that they have to meet as well that are laid out in the scriptures as well. But you may have a deacon over maintenance, a deacon over the grounds that make sure things are getting mowed and stuff. Think of it like a presidential cabinet.
Okay.
Like, the president cannot do everything. As a matter of fact, we had a president, Garfield, I think it was, that he had the quote that he said that he stepped down from the most important office he ever held to become president of the United States. And by that, he means that he stepped down from being an elder in the Church of Christ to become the president of the United States.
Oh, wow.
And so that gives you some idea of how much work these guys are doing. Because, President Garfield said, I did a whole lot more work as an elder of the church than I have as president of the United States.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because he had more people to delegate to as president,
Fair play.
from Secretary of State, Speaker of the House, and all that. So, not everything, sometimes they delegate to a deacon, and a deacon may say, "Hey, Daniel, you seem to be really good at this tech stuff. Could you help us out a little bit?"
Yeah, you come in here, volunteer for some time, teach us what your ways are.
Yeah.
Because you have to have support. Man, if you do not have support going into a church, that is going to be a huge struggle. And how can that church support you now? You're going from Alabama. You're going to a whole new place here. And how can that church be able to, with the elders that are already established and the groups that are already established there, how can they best support you?
I'm so glad you asked this question because this is something that I do not think gets understood. First off, be patient. It takes
Yes.
time to build relationships. Pray for me, pray with me, invite me to your events. I want to be part of your family. I have learned that if somebody's in the hospital and they say they don't want visitors, that doesn't include me. You
Yeah.
still want me to come
Yeah.
because I'm your preacher.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with people that, they said, Dad's in the hospital, but please no visitors at this time. And I didn't go. And they said, "Why didn't you come?" I said, "Well, you said you didn't want visitors." "Oh, you're not a visitor. You're family."
Yeah.
And that's what I really want. I want to be part of your family. But, I equate it like, when me and Jennifer first started dating, we did we didn't know each other very well. And that's why we dated.
Yeah, you gotta be able to learn.
Yeah.
You gotta be able to
And
grow as a
so,
couple.
be patient with me because I've got to learn what makes you tick, what works for you, what you want, what you don't want. And, I hope that you will help me be a better minister in August than I was in July.
Yes. Oh, and in that first year, you kind of had there's a lot that you have to do to establish yourself with a community. What are some of those things that for you, like a checklist of that first year, I've got to get this done? As you just mentioned, a big major one there saying that, hey, I want the community to feel like I'm family.
Mhm.
What is some other things that you consider on like a checklist that you think that you should have done within that first year in order that is considered important to make sure that you establish yourself within your church?
One thing that I've done wrong in the past is to come in and try and immediately change everything. Like, "Oh, this isn't gonna work. You gotta do it my way." No, I wanna learn from that, and this time, sit back the first year or 2 and try and do it their way. I think about it like a TV show, Trading Spouses.
Okay.
You know, they come in and, the last congregation that I was at, I tried to come in and make a bunch of changes, and that was wrong because they had just come off their last minister had been there for 30 years.
Oh, wow. Woo.
Like, so they were not ready for changes.
Yeah.
So, take a step back because there's some healing that needs to happen because some people may not have liked the last minister. Some people might have loved him
Yeah.
and they're not looking forward to you. So give them time to adapt as well and kind of do it their way. And then, after a year or so, maybe if you see things that could be better, sit down with the elders and say, "Hey, this is working good. This isn't working so much. And from my experience, I've seen this work better. What do you think?
Okay.
Do you think it would work good here?" And you kind of defer to their wisdom.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's very good, smart thinking there because of it. Again, it's being new. There's already something that's already again established, that's
Mhm.
already in place, and you're just trying to find your place and your role within that time to be able to then adapt and change and grow to put your stamp on it in a way. Now, there are going to be a lot of policies, again, being 30 years plus that this minister was
Yeah.
there before you. If you're going in and you've seen all these policies, you've seen all this stuff that you've been in the church for a while, is there one that you would like to say add in order to maybe that you think is kind of missing right now, kind of within the church?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is to remember that we are not just Christians one day a week. It's a 24/7 thing. And, study your Bible outside of Sunday and Wednesdays as well. And, just seek those that you can have spiritual conversations with as you go throughout your daily life. I mean, so many times I think that church members think, well, I'll bring them to church and let the preacher teach them. No, you could teach them as well because,
Community. Yeah.
there are things that I can't tell you because we don't have that relationship. But if your mom told you, she could tell you because y'all have that relationship.
Yeah.
And if you bring a stranger into church, they're not going to want to hear from me that, oh, you need to change this in your life. But maybe it's your neighbor or your friend. And you say, hey, man, I've noticed this in your life. Like, you ought to work to correct that. You might could take it. There are some people in my life that could tell me that I'm a dirty, rotten scoundrel. And I'll be like, you know what? I'm probably a dirty, rotten scoundrel. But yet again, there's other people that if you told me I was a dirty, rotten scoundrel, I'm like, dude, you don't know me. Like, what do you mean?
That's true. It's all again perspective for it because of your mother. Again, your mother birthed you. She's seen you in your highs and your lows, and you being new into a church or being new and for maybe only a couple of years and new into someone's life who's been around for say 10, 15, 30, 50 years. There's going to be that drastic different communication, and that is curious to me how you're going to approach whenever you're doing education in the church.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to approach your youth to your adults to your children, or do you have any specific programs that you like to maybe use with the different age brackets, or do you consider like, hey, here's a one size kind of fits all kind of range?
I definitely do not think that it's a one size fits all type thing. There is a great program that helped me become the man I am today. It's called Lads to Leaders. And basically, it's helping to develop the future ministers, future elders, future deacons of the church. And through programs like that, I preached my first sermon when I was 11 years old. And so I think sometimes that's what people need to understand. Yes, I'm 34 years old, but I've been preaching sermons since I was 11 years old. That's 25 years.
That's a lot.
Like, I do have some experience to bring to the table, if you will. But, kind of going back to adapting, I mean, there's a lot of culture shock that I'm gonna
That's true.
have to adapt to.
You were
And
telling me about a couple of those earlier, and I was
yeah,
like, what?
like, first off, I had to learn how to pronounce the name of the church that I'll be working at,
Oh man.
the Wasatch Church of Christ. And it's been interesting, not to throw dear old dad under the bus, but he's kind of helped me realize that because the other day we were at church in Georgia and somebody asked my dad, like, where's he going? Oh, he's going to the Wasabi Church of Christ.
Oh man.
And
Oh,
which,
that'd be an
uh
interesting name.
yeah, and which Wasatch is too. Think of the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
The Wasatch Mountain Range is where I'll be. And
Okay.
literally, if I walk outside of my house or I walk outside of the church, the Wasatch Mountains are right there. Like that, they're beautiful.
Nice.
Interesting fact, from when I'm preaching my sermon, if I look out the back door, I see the Wasatch Mountains. So I get to see the mountains while I'm preaching.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so Weber, how would you say that?
Weeber?
Weber.
Weber or Weber?
They say it Weber.
Weber.
which is
Potato.
yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of that. Because if I say to them Weber State, which I did while I was in Utah, they said, "Where are you talking about?" And finally his wife said, "He's talking about Weber." And I'm like, "Okay, go look."
McDonough.
Yeah. And we have that here too in Georgia, Smyrna, where the Braves play. A lot of people say that different. There's a lot of differences. I can't.
Atlanta,
Yeah.
Lana.
Yeah.
Oh, people go, where's Lana?
Like,
There's ATL in there. No, yeah, there is, but it's again regional.
yeah.
Everything
And
dialects.
so there's a lot of things which
Pop.
let's go ahead and cross this bridge. I'm gonna have to get used to the fact that people down there love to hear me talk.
True.
Like my southern accent. Like
So you say down there, I would have said up there because if you're going up in the north, but again, each individual different.
Well, and that's a whole other thing. You know, we say down, up.
Yeah.
I mix it up, but like
They're gonna be like west, east,
Like
south,
in-
north.
like in the Bible, this kind of helps with the cultural differences. You know, they'll say they went up to Jerusalem or they went down to Jerusalem, where, you know, we may look at it on a map and say, no, they went up, but they went down in elevation or they went up in elevation.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
And there they kind of take the biblical thing. You know, they may say we went down to Wasatch, and you're like, what? Like, you know, we went down to Ogden, and it's like, no, you went up. Like, that's going north. Like, no, you went up in elevation. So in the Western culture, they kind of use elevation more than direction.
And that's a huge thing, and that's something that's going to be interesting to see how you adapt with language out there and how that's going to create maybe a barrier or create more intrigue because if people want to come and hear the guy with the southern accent.
Yeah.
And even though I would have never picked up I never would have thought about that, but that's a huge thing. I was out in Denver recently and
Yeah.
hearing some people talk, and I don't have really much of a southern accent. I don't. I have kind of a neutralized one. It's still different of the words that they can be able to use.
Yeah.
And that's drastically something that you're going to adapt to, I guess. You know, that's
Yeah,
because you
and-
have to.
Well, and kind of going back to where we started, there's probably going to be a lot of jargon
Oh
that I
my gosh.
use that they don't have a clue what I mean. And, you know, kind of need to make it to like, dude, if I say something you don't understand, come talk to me.
Let's go. Yeah.
Because they may not know what grits are.
True.
Like,
True. That's
Oh.
definitely that's going to be a huge one to kind of figure out. And I'm curious to see how that's going to change into the community service. And I know this is going to sound like a weird transfer, but within community service of being able to understand, hey, using the terminology of park, I think ballpark, or I think I'm going to to go play in the park, play some pickleball or something. Their park may be, hey, we're going to the parking lot and just kind of going to meet out. Hey, let's go meet out the park. That could create a whole entire thing for trying to build your community if you may get miscommunications, and that's there.
When I was in college, I had a college minister who was from Australia, and there was all kinds of times that he would say something and we're like, what are you talking about? Because like, you know, like even another fun thing that we had happen while we were there, we go to the grocery store and we walk in, and my wife and I said, this just looks like a Kroger. Like, it just looked like a Kroger.
Yeah.
And they even had like symbols that looked like Kroger. And we get to the checkout, and they were like, do you have a shopper's card? And I was like, does a Kroger card count? And they're like, yeah, we take a Kroger card. I'm like, okay. So this is Western Kroger. Like they just changed the name. So And there's a lot of things like that, but the good thing is they're used to people from all over coming
Yeah.
because within 3 miles from the church, there's Hill Air Force Base. So
Okay.
people come from all over to go to work at the Air Force Base.
Wow.
So, that's another thing that I'll have to get used to is people come, people go.
Yeah, that's true. Now, something that this is going to change directions of the conversation a little bit, but you have struggles with kidney disease
Mhm.
and you're going into a different elevation as well. How do you adapt as going from state to state in dealing with your kidney disease and being a minister?
Well, that's a whole
That's a whole nother world.
yeah,
I
that's
totally jumped keys there, but it's
well,
something that popped in my
that's
mind.
well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because, that we talked about, have I had to struggle with not having kids earlier. Having kidney disease definitely cost me some preaching jobs, like unspoken, because people didn't understand and didn't want to understand. When I sit down with elders or something, I have to help them understand that I don't the yes, I have to adapt, but you know, things come and you adapt. For instance, with moving to Utah, I placed a travel order. So they will they're going to deliver 2 weeks worth of supplies to me when I get there, dialysis supplies, and I fly with my machine. Man, that is a whole 'nother ball game. Like, because TSA don't understand dialysis machines, and I just accept the fact that I'm gonna get the wand when I go through TSA because I have a tube that has metal that I can't take off, and you just can't be offended because TSA is gonna be like, "Take your tube off." I'm like, "I can't. It's attached to my body." And you just have to be patient with helping them understand that, if you will. And, the church has to understand that you may call me at 6 in the morning and I can't get to you till 10 because I'm still on my dialysis machine. So there's some understanding there that needs to be understood.
Yeah, and I can imagine can be frustrating at times for you because you wanna get up and go, "Let's go." Like, I
Yeah,
wanna get there, but yeah, because your health is important because if you can't serve if
yeah.
you're not feeling your best.
Well, and like this morning, I needed to get ready, have breakfast, and a lot of times I get Jennifer to bring me breakfast in the room, and I'm getting dressed while I'm still on the machine, which that is a great thing because my tube is like 30 foot. So, I can still get around in the house to some degree,
Yeah.
do what I need to do. I can go and brush my teeth and stuff while I'm finishing up. And, it's kind of just part of my day. It's
Yeah.
like brushing my teeth. I have to unhook from my dialysis thing and kind of getting the congregation to understand that.
And that's important. That's amazing that it again doesn't it the church understands.
Yeah.
They've got to be able to understand. They've got to be able to know that, and that's awesome that you're able to find places that are open and willing and understanding to be able to do so.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot that has gone into this building up for 36 years that you've been on this earth here.
Mm.
Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for people that are looking at getting into this career?
Well, I'll give the same advice that was given to me when I was in high school and I talked to ministers. You have to have thick skin. Like, I mean, because people are going to say things to you that hurt your feelings,
True.
and they don't mean to
Yeah.
all the time. And another thing, you have to be flexible. You know, we were talking about this off recording, you know, before we started. Like, a preacher has to be flexible
Yes.
because, you know, I may need to get prep work done, and I'm thinking, okay, Monday, I'm going to get that done. I'm just going to spend all day Monday on my sermon. I'm going to get way ahead, and, you know, it'll be great. And then Sister so and so passes away. You get to go to the funeral home and be with the family, and your day just changed. Or kind of going back to miscommunications, thing miss what's the word I'm looking for here, Cade? We talked about it earlier. Misconceptions
There we
about
go. Misconceptions, miscommunication, misunderstandings. There you go. Yeah.
about ministry. A lot of times people think that we're free. You know, that all we do is preach on Sunday. If it's not Sunday or Wednesday, we're available. That's not true. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that that you don't understand. And when I say brother or sister, I'm talking about members of the church. Maybe Sister so and so doesn't have any family in Utah,
Yeah.
and she needs somebody to take her to the doctor. So what do? I take her to the doctor. Is that when I signed my contract to move to Utah, was that one of the expectations that was listed? No.
It's
But it
understood.
kind of
Yeah.
comes with the job. And the thing of it is, you have to be a Renaissance man. And being a minister, I have learned a lot of stuff, just like being friends with you. Truth be told, one of the experiences that I got to have that I probably wouldn't have had I not become friends with you is going to an Atlanta United game
Oh, yeah.
and coming to understand soccer better. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not the biggest fan of musicals, but I've been to a lot of musicals
Yeah.
because
Part
somebody
of the
from
church. Someone's in the
part of
church
the
is in it.
church was in it. And, you know, there are some experiences that I have never would have done had somebody not been in it. For instance, here in Cherokee County, while I was here, there was a young lady who was in a musical, Shrek the Musical.
Okay.
That seems crazy to me.
You can make anything a musical. That's the thing, that crazy thing.
And
I'm not a big musical person, but I've seen like
Yeah.
so many different varieties that
I'm
they can
not-
turn it into. I don't know how, but they do.
I'm not a big musical person, but I have to admit that I have watched Shrek the Musical more since then. Like, I was so intrigued by it that I watched the Broadway. Just for the listeners, if you don't like musicals, but you want to give it a try, start with Shrek the Musical. But if you like the movie Shrek, you'll love the musical even better because it is hilarious. They take, you know, things that you didn't realize about Shrek, like when you have you seen Shrek?
Yes, it's been a
Yeah.
long time, but yes.
Lord Farquaad, right?
Yeah.
When you watched that movie, did you realize that he was a little person?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they showed several times where he's standing up and he had to get up
Yeah.
on a stool to be able
Yeah.
to do something with Fiona.
Yeah, well, they make that painfully obvious in the musical, and it's just hilarious.
Oh,
Like, for instance, like, they have, like, fake legs when he's on a horse to make him look bigger.
Look like he's taller.
It's hilarious.
That's awesome.
But yeah, there's that. But so there's a lot of aspects of ministry that you get put in. You get put in the most important places of people's lives. And when you get married, there's a preacher there.
Yeah.
When you pass away, there's a preacher there. When there's a birth in the family, a preacher is normally there. When you become a Christian, there's a preacher there. And so you really are a family member. And these are all things that you need to consider when considering going into the ministry field. Like, you wear a lot of hats. There have been times that somebody would come to the church and I was unclogging a toilet and they're like, I need to speak to the minister. And I'm like, hi, I'm Daniel. And they're like, no, that's great. I need to speak to the preacher. And I'm like, yeah.
Something had to get fixed. It had
It's
to get
like,
done.
you see it says Daniel Welker out there on the building, minister. Yeah, that's me. Here's my ID. And they're like, why are you unclogging the toilet? Because somebody had to do it, and here I am.
Yeah.
That's why I say I'm a minister and a servant. Because, you don't expect, when you walk in to go visit a congregation, that the preacher is going to be the first person to shake your hand.
Oh.
Like, that may be what happens. And there's been a lot of times that, somebody would come visit and I'd be talking to them and I go and preach. They're like, wait
a second. Connection here.
Like, were you visiting? Like, are you just visiting preaching here? And that's another fun thing about the tryouts. There's people who visit and don't realize that you're trying out. And, they'll be like, who do I talk to if I need assistance? Like, I don't know. I'm just visiting.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we're visiting too. I'm like, well, hey, we have something in
Congratulations.
common.
Yeah, we have something there.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's lot to it.
I can believe that. And I'm sure you have some interesting, funny stories that you have probably experienced over the years as well. Do you want to share any with us?
Oh, yeah. I'll share a couple short ones just to kind of give you a glimpse into the ministry life. One thing that we haven't mentioned is that in a lot of ways, I'm a third generation preacher.
Oh, nice.
My dad was a preacher. He's now an elder in the church. So I've gotten to see that transformation. But one thing as a kid, you get drugged along with the preacher as your dad. And we were preaching a gospel meeting. We'll just say, my dad was preaching a gospel meeting. We'll just say in the state of Alabama. One of the things was where we were staying did not have a shower head. And the tub was too small for us to shower in. So we had to shower in the baptistry, which is where they do the baptisms, which is basically a big tub.
Yeah.
But it's in the front of the church building, so you can understand where that comes from. And my dad had taken his shower, and it came my time. And I got situated and started the bathing process. And then I heard 2 or 3 female voices.
Oh, gosh. Oh.
And keep in mind, I'm in the front of the church building. And I holler out, who's here? I wasn't expecting company. And come to find out, 50 to 100 ladies were making their way into the church building. And I was disrobed. So I had to say, will you give me 5-10 minutes to get out of here? So that was extremely interesting. But let's just say I don't mean to get into the paranormal,
Ooh.
but one of the scariest places in the world is being alone in a dark church building.
Oh.
Like I mean, because imagine being a minister and you think you're the only person in the building. Then all of a sudden you hear footsteps and you can't figure out where it's coming from.
Oh,
Because I mean, it's a big church.
yeah.
Church buildings are big, and
Still.
your
Oh.
office is small, and there's definitely some of that. I'll like we talked about with the bathing. I thought I was alone in the church building,
Yeah.
but I definitely wasn't. Interesting thing, varmints in the church building. I'll never forget preaching at a country church. I was in my office studying, and one of the girls in the congregation was a farmer, and she had 2 pigs. And one of the hardest things about being a farmer is that at some point, Wilbur has to become dinner.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing. I know that you have your perspective on that.
Well, my family's got beef cattle,
Yeah,
so I understand
yeah.
entirely.
But this young lady thought that she would combat it a little bit, and to help her identify that one day her pet pig was going to become dinner, she just named her pigs Bacon and Sausage.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
and
Okay, that's interesting.
I got a little nervous one time when they invited me over for lunch, and they said, "Come over, we're having bacon and sausage." And I was like, "Hold up,
Oh, wait a second.
let's talk." So, there's some interesting things there. I recently got to go fill in a congregation not far from that congregation in Alabama where I met Bacon and Sausage. And I was talking, and I come to find out that Bacon, before he became dinner, was a 400-pound pig. No, 2,000 pounds. And I'm just like, that's a big pig. And I'll spare the details, but let's just say they had fun loading a 2,000-pound pig to go to the meat market.
Yeah. I can only
Yeah.
imagine. I've seen 2,000-pound, 3,000-pound almost cows, and you're like, I can only imagine what a pig.
A pig.
A pig.
Yeah.
Oh, I cannot imagine that one.
Yeah.
Now, we've discussed a lot of variety of different things here. Is there stuff that I maybe overlooked that you want to discuss real quick?
I mean, kind of like you said, this is something that we could, if we really wanted to bore the audience, I mean, we could have a whole season and just ministry. But I guess, understand that your minister is a person. That's really something I want to stress. We're not God. We put our pants on one leg at a time too. We do things, and you know, counseling is something that we kind of skipped over, but I guess we kind of touched on it. But that was something that terrified me about going into ministry, so much so that I minored in counseling.
Okay.
And that was one of the smartest things for me, and it has definitely helped me because I have, at my last congregation, we had a member who was on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And I had a lot of ministers say, I don't know how you deal with that. Like, I couldn't do that. But because of my minor in counseling, I had some ideas of how to do that. And one thing you have to realize is, yes, that member was 34 years old. I'm 34 years old, but I can't approach him like he's 34 years old because his mind was like a child.
Mhm.
And so there was a interesting thing that sometimes I had to treat him like an adult. Sometimes I had to treat him like a child. And it's hard sometimes for ministers to know which glove to use,
Yeah.
and one thing that I haven't talked about is how hard it is to leave a congregation because I had a lot of great relationships there in Phoenix City, a lot of people I'm going to miss. And honestly, I may not really sit in until I get settled in Utah because I don't think it's really set in that I'm not going back to the house in Phoenix City
Yeah.
because, where we sit today, I've come to visit my parents a lot and gone back to Phoenix City. I don't think it's really set in on my mind that the next time lay down in my king size bed, it'll be in
Utah.
Utah.
Yeah.
Like, and, it's just, um, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot and I'm thankful for it. And, I think we've hit everything I wanted to hit.
And well, Daniel, thank you for
Yeah.
spending the time this afternoon. Is there any words of wisdom or last minute kind of words of advice that it can be anything? It doesn't have to be targeted at what we've talked about today. Do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to provide the audience with before leaving out today?
Yeah. Remember that we never know what the people we come in contact with are going through. You know, maybe the waitress at Cracker Barrel is a little rude to you. And don't take it personal. Maybe it's their first day back after having a kid. And this is their first time not being around their newborn kid all day. Maybe their mom or dad just passed away. Maybe they don't know if they're going to have a job at the end of the day. Treat people with kindness. Go back to the golden rule. Treat people as you want to be treated. But also remember that sometimes people don't want to be treated like you want to be treated.
True.
I remember when we went out to Utah and we went out to eat with my best friend. And he was like, dude, you were just overly kind to that waitress. Like, could you have toned it down? And I'm like, dude, what you need to understand is I'm a minister. I'm a pillar in this society. You have quotes from your mom.
Yeah.
I think the quote that I will end with is a quote from my dad.
Do it.
I loved my dad, and, growing up on Friday nights when I would go out, before I would leave, he would say, son, I want you to remember two things. Remember who you are and whose you are. And, no matter where I go, I represent in Utah, I represent the Wasatch Church of Christ. I represent the Welker name. I'm a third generation preacher. Some people know me as Danny's boy. Some people know me as Miles's grandson. And, kind of like we talked about with, you feel like you need to live up to the Cade name now that somebody is named after you for all intents and purposes. No matter where I go, I wear the name Christian.
Yeah.
That's it. I am not a preacher, reverend. I'm a Christian. Anybody who's a member of my church is a Christian, and I hope that we try to be family like Christ-like wherever we go. And, that's just kind of the bit of word. Probably when you and I were teenagers, we had those WWJD bracelets.
I remember those, yeah.
A young man that I had the opportunity to come in contact with, I wear this bracelet. Philip Lutzenkirchen. He happened to play for Auburn. He also played for Lassiter High School, right down the road.
Right down the road, yeah.
In Marietta. And sadly, he made a poor decision and died by being drunk, and driving. That's a sad thing. But one quote that he said is, "I know God is working, so I smile."
Love it.
And having kidney disease, I've had some hard days, but I smile.
Yeah.
Because God is working.
Love it. Daniel, thank you for coming on and spending this morning with us. We're going to go have some lunch here in a little bit. Looking forward to Keatsburg Cafe. I think that's where we're going to get to.
Yeah.
Something like that. Looking forward to having a good meal and catching up with you because it's been almost a year since I've last seen you.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up here at that moment. If you would like to reach out to me, my name is Cade Curtis. You can find me at Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. They're all going to be under Learning from Friends podcast. You can also look at learningfromfriends.com. There's a website that's there. I have an email, which is Cade, CADE, at learningfromfriends.com. If you would like to make a contribution to the podcast, I have a Patreon page. You can be able to donate at the $5, $25, $100 level. Those are the levels I just kind of set up that to be able to contribute into the podcast. My biggest ask from you right now is to leave a review, refer it to a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to promote anything that you would like to be able to be out there into the universe. So as we leave today, my name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide on this lovely adventure that I like to call Learning from Friends. And most of all, don't forget, let your curiosity fly high.